Anyway, so let's do something from this week's parsha. I wanted to thank everybody for coming. As you know, this is the Shabbat right before Rosh Hashana. It's getting very serious. Rosh Hashana is coming. We're going to have a good year. So actually, this week's parsha starts, it's called Parsha of Nitzavim. Now, sometimes Nitzavim is read together with Parsha of Vayelech, which is like this year. There are two parshas together. Sometimes they're separate. Now, the reason why, if you look simply in Halacha, the custom is that we always read Parsha of Nitzavim before Rosh Hashana. This week's parsha. And what's the reason? Simply, so I think we maybe spoke about it a week ago, I'm not sure. But the reason is because we have a custom to read all the curses that are in last week's portion. We read it before Rosh Hashanah. And there are a couple of reasons given. Sometimes the Torah uses to scare you. It happens. Some people, they work through scaring. So the Torah has to talk about, they put it in a way that we learn about the curses before Rosh Hashanah, so we should repent. See the curses, what happens if a person doesn't keep the commandments, we get scared, we don't do anything wrong. And then that's why we read before Rosh Hashanah for us to repent. They give a second reason. When we start Rosh Hashanah prayers, we say, may the year and the curses of this year finish, and hopefully the new year and its blessings will start. So since it's the end of the year, we read about the curses as a sign the curses will finish. But the Chachamim, the rabbis, didn't like to have exactly a week before Rosh Hashanah the curses. But they wanted to have it read by the end of the year. So they said, we're going to read the curses 2 weeks before Rosh Hashanah, and the week before we're going to have a parsha that doesn't talk about, negative things. So they put Parsha of Kitabah, which talks about the curses last week, which is 2 weeks before Rosh Hashanah. And this Shabbat, we're going to read the Parsha of Nitzavim. So basically, it's just a practical thing to make a separation between the curses and the New Year. However, there's actually, according to many books, especially in Kabbalistic books, I think one of the first people that says that is a man with the name of Yeshayahu Horowitz. He has a book which is called Shalah. He says that's not the only reason. Actually, every parsha, whenever it's read, it has a connection to the time that's read. Now, since Parsha of Nitzavim, without any exception, is always read before Rosh Hashanah, it has to have a connection with Rosh Hashanah. There must be a hint in this week's Parsha about Rosh Hashanah. So they say that actually the beginning of the Parsha Nitzavim, it starts, Atem Nitzavim Hayom Kulchem. It says, all of you stand. That's what Moses is telling the Jews. All of you stand today. Lifna Hashem Elokechem, in front of your God. Right? And then it counts 10 levels. Rashechem, the heads of the tribes. And it counts 10 levels amongst the Jews. So simply, what does Hayom today mean? You're standing today. What's the day that Moses is talking about? So simply learning is the day that he was passing away. Simply. And Moses says, you know what, I'm dying today, so therefore I'm going to make a new covenant with you to have to keep the Torah. They made a second covenant. They made one at the time that we got the 10 commandments. Before Moses dies, he makes a second covenant with the Jews that have to promise when they enter the land, they're going to keep the Torah. Why do they have to make a new covenant? Right? Why isn't the first one enough? So very simply, Rashi says, the way he explains the Torah, because the Jews actually broke the first covenant by making the golden calf. They promised to serve God, they went against it. So that covenant was weakened. So because of that, Moshe makes a second covenant with them. That once you go to Israel, you have to keep Torah. But again, according to this, Hayom means the day of his death. Now the Kabbalistic people say that actually Hayom means the day of Rosh Hashanah. When Moshe says today you stand in front of God, Hayom is standing for Rosh Hashanah. So you see the connection of the Parsha with Rosh Hashanah. Where did they get the idea that Hayom means Rosh Hashanah? Hayom means the day. You're standing today. How do they know that Hayom means actually Rosh Hashanah? So they bring another verse. You see how they play with verses? Very, very interesting. Yeah. When anybody studied the book of Job, whatever it's called, you know a little bit about the story of Job? He was a righteous man. And then, one time the Satan comes in front of God and he says, come on, this guy is righteous. You gave him so much money, he's so cheap. He brings you a little bit of, sacrifices. So actually God gives permission to the Satan to test him. So he loses his health, he loses his wife, his children. The test was, will he still believe in God, or he only believed in God because of the blessings that he had? So when Satan comes, it says, Vahi Hayom. It was that day that the Satan came in front of God. The Targum, the translation, which is not actually written down by authors of the Mishnah, when it says it was the day Hayom. It translates Dina Rabbah, the day of the great judgment. So see in book of Iyuv, what does Hayom mean? The day of judgment, which is Rosh Hashana. That's a big judgment. And in this week's portion that Moshe says you're standing, also says Hayom today. So they compare the two, and the same Moshe is saying that you're standing in front of God on Rosh Hashanah. So this is what God is telling us. You're standing in front of the judgment, in judgment in front of God. Now, actually, with this, let's go through another question. We're going to see what does Moshe mean that we say we're standing in front of God on the day of the judgment. Let's go a step back. So far clear? It's going to get hopefully even more clear. Forgive my accent. Anyways, another thing that they say is, as you know, there's a custom in every synagogue. Thank God, in this there is no argument between Ashkenazim and Sephardim. You'll get along in this one. What they say is, every Saturday before the new month, we bless the new month. It's called Birkat HaChodesh. You know about it, I'm sure, right? You go some Saturdays to shul. They say because new month is coming, we bless the new month. Now, when did this custom start? You see, when we had the temple, and actually two witnesses used to come, and they would see the moon at a certain shape, so they would actually declare the day of Rosh Chodesh publicly that today is Rosh Chodesh. Now we don't have that. So what did they do? They said the Shabbat before Rosh Chodesh, we make a custom to remember this. We announce that the new month is coming, and we ask God, please make the month a month of blessing. There's only one month that we don't bless. That's the month of Tishrei. This Shabbat, when you go to shul, they don't bless the new month. You don't ask God, please give us a month that's full of blessings. And it really doesn't make sense at the first glance. The reason is because if you bless any month, when that God should give us a good month, when it comes to Tishrei, how much more so you should bless the month? Because that's the beginning of the judgment of the year. Don't you want to have a good judgment? So why wouldn't you bless month of Tishrei? It doesn't make sense. So there's many answers given. Here the Baal Shem Tov says, because really God is He Himself blesses the month of Tishrei. If God Himself blesses the month of Tishrei, we can't go and bless the month. What am I saying? That God's blessing is not enough? I still need my blessing? My blessing compared to God is really worthless because He's infinite. And then the Baal Shem Tov adds, because God blesses the month of Tishrei, we get energy, power from this to bless the other 11 months. Now, what's God's blessing? How does He bless the month? So this is what they say. The blessing that God gives us is the first few verses in this week's parsha. When it says, Atem nitzavim hayom, you stand today in front of God in judgment, that's God's blessing. What's a blessing? So far clear? I'm going to get even more clear, I hope. Anyways, so anybody that speaks a little bit of a Hebrew, what's a regular word for standing in Hebrew? When I say I'm standing, I stand. Ani what? How do you say sitting? You don't know. Okay. How do you say I? Okay, that we know. Anyways, usually for standing, it's omed. Right? You find in the Torah when witnesses come, it says, Vayamdu shnei anashim, two people stand. It doesn't say nitzavim, people stand up. Over here, the Torah uses a very weird word. I mean, different word when it says you're standing in front of God. So here, Kabbalah explains, omdi means you're standing regularly. Nitzavim means you're standing victorious. That's what nitzav means. When somebody stands firm, he's victorious, so then we call it, that's called nitzavim. So now here, Baal Shem Tov says, this is the blessing that God gives in this month. Rosh Hashana is coming, the day of judgment. So God says, Atem nitzavim hayom, you're standing victorious in the judgment of Rosh Hashana. That's His blessing. All right, so we answered all the questions. Number one, this parsha is connected to Rosh Hashana, right? Nitzavim hayom, standing today, means Rosh Hashana. And the reason why we don't bless the month is because God Himself is blessing it. And what's God's blessing? He's blessing us that we should be victorious on Rosh Hashanah. We should win the judgment. So, but we don't always win the judgment. So what kind of a blessing is that is not fulfilled? So you must say there's a condition attached. So to understand what the condition is, it's very interesting. When Moshe says simply, standing in front of God, if you look at the Torah, let me just read it inside. It's actually an extra word. This is going to be the toughest part to do, to be honest. So it says, let's read it inside. Atem nitzavim hayom kulchem. You're standing today, all of you, lifnei Hashem Elokechem, in front of your God. Now the Torah counts 10 levels according to Kabbalah. Roshechem, your heads. Shiftechem means your tribes. Ziknechem, your elders. Shotrechem is your policemen. Kolish Yisrael, all the men. That's 5. Tapchem, your children. Neshechem, your wives. Gercha, the converts. And then amongst the converts, it counts another 2 levels. People that chop the woods and people that carry water. So these are basically 10 levels amongst the Jews. They're all standing in front of God on Rosh Hashana. But there's one extra word. In the beginning says you stand, Atan nitzavim hayom kulachem. All of you are standing. What does the Torah say the word all of you? If it counts the 10 levels, everybody's included. But if I count every single name of you in this room, I say you, I don't have to say again all of you. The word all of you is extra. So here Kabbalah explains, God is saying that there's only one condition attached. For us to have a blessed year, all these 10 levels have to be kulchem, means they all have to be united. You have to put the differences away. If there's unity amongst the Jews, then God promises that we're going to win the judgment of Rosh Hashana. But if God forbid there is separation amongst the Jews, then the blessing might not work in an open way. Go ahead.
Can you repeat the 10?
The 10 is Roshechem, your heads, Shiftechem, your tribes. But it's not according to Rashi. According to Rashi, there's only 9 levels. But again, then Ziknechem, your elders, Shotrechem are your policemen, Tapchem are the children. Oh, I'm sorry, Kolish Yisrael, every man, that's 5. Tapchem are the children, Neshechem, your wives, Gercha, the converts. And then amongst the converts, it counts another 2 levels. Some of them are Chotev Etzechot, wood choppers, and then Shoev Memecha, people that draw water. So the word Kulchem means the only time that they stand victorious on the judgment of Rosh Hashanah is only if the Jews are united. Now you might come and say, you know what, that's a nice Kabbalistic thing. Is really unity that important? Maybe they're just saying it to encourage us. But actually, we're going to bring proofs from the Gemara, not just from Kabbalistic books, from the Talmud, and actually from stories in the Tanakh, in the Navi, that if there is unity amongst the Jews, brings the biggest blessings, and if God forbid there is no unity, brings the biggest curses. This one, I'm sure everybody knows it almost by heart. The Gemara says, the Talmud says in Masechta Yuma, the Gemara Yuma, that talks about Yom Kippur, so it talks about the service of the temple. So the Gemara digresses, and it says the first temple got destroyed. Why? Gemara really understands it, because they did bloodshed, they killed each other, there was adultery, and there was idolatry. 3 sins that I'm supposed to get killed and not do it. If they did it, so they deserve the destruction of the temple, whatever, or Jews, whatever. Come to the Gemara, they deserve to get killed. But then the Gemara goes, by the second temple, everybody was religious. The Gemara's language is so severe, you know what I'm saying, in the religiousness. They actually studied Torah, they kept the mitzvah, they even gave charity. So the Gemara says, if the Jews were so religious, studying to imagine, every night everybody goes to Kollel to study. They even gave charity, right? They even, did the mitzvah. If they were so religious, how could God allow the Beit HaMikdash to get destroyed? And so many Jews got killed. So the Gemara says, because they had hatred for no reason, baseless hatred. And the Chafetz Chaim adds, he doesn't think just hating somebody in the heart is that bad, that causes destruction. He says they brought the hatred in their speech. They said Lashon Hara. So the Gemara says they were religious, but because there was separation amongst the Jews to such an extent that they spoke Lashon Hara, that did not warrant them to have the Beit HaMikdash and have a safe life. They got destroyed. So we see not being united, no matter how religious we are, if there's separation amongst the Jews, the blessing is taken away. Another one, that we see unity brings the biggest blessings. If you look in the history of the Jews, when King Solomon died, he was not the way God wanted him to be. Great man, at the end of his life, again, in God's judgment. He was not a proper king. So God says, you know what, because I honor your father, I respect your father, I will not divide the Jewish kingdom during your lifetime. But Solomon, Shlomo, when you're going to die, so 10 of the tribes will separate from your son. They're going to choose a new king. So Shlomo dies, Rechavam takes over. Rechavam was son of Shlomo. So then 10 tribes, God puts a mistake in his head. He actually puts a lot of taxes on the people. People were already taxed. In times of Solomon, the father of Rechavam, he even makes the taxes stronger, so they all run away. Maybe Harris should listen to this. He wants to make more taxes. So then people are going to go to different countries. I don't know. I don't think so. Because they really make the lie look so good that they don't realize that they're making taxes more. They say the rich don't pay enough. That's what they say. But they tax everybody afterwards. Let's not get into politics. It's going to cause a fight. But anyways, So the Jews, 10 tribes separated. Now the northern part, so that was the northern part of Israel, 10 tribes. Their leader became an idol worshiper. One of the greatest sins. So the Torah says Ephraim was the north side of Israel. It says they are worshiping idols. But God tells the prophet, Hanachlu, don't punish them, let them be. But they're worshiping idols. Why don't get punished? So the Gemara says, because the Jews in north, they never spoke Lashon Hara one against the other. The unity was amazing. They didn't get punished. More than that, the Talmud says when they went to a war, they won the war. How could somebody worship idols and win the war? Doesn't make sense. So it says unity is so great that even though they had many sins between themselves and God, nevertheless they were winning the wars. And God tells the prophet, Hanach, leave him alone. Don't punish them. So it's not just a Kabbalistic thing, According to Kabbalah, we're saying a nice explanation in the Pasuk. Yeah, you're going to be victorious in Rosh Hashana if you're united. But actually, we see it in the Pasuk. That's one thing that I want to share with you. Go ahead.
If God doesn't like discord, separation, so he wanted separation after Solomon's death because they couldn't get along. Hashem wants unity.
No.
He wants unity, so why should there be?
You have a very good question. I get what you're saying. That was a punishment for Solomon in simple terms, that he had to lose the kingdom. But still, there could be unity. I'm saying there could have been unity amongst the Jews.
The people have to divide into like
two separate domains, and they're actually hostile to each other, the whole time. Unfortunately. Why would God bring such a punishment that they get separated? I don't know. You have a good question. They wanted to. And then God tells Solomon's son, don't go to war. This was my will to get the division. There's actually, they say that the reason why he got separated was not only because of Solomon, because King David accepted Lashon Hara from somebody. So that divided his relationship with someone else. So then God says, so then the kingdom will be divided into. There's a lot of deep explanations why it happened. But again, unity could have been there.
Yeah, was that with
Job? You?
Yeah.
What about him?
Did he speak Lashon Hara to King David and he accepted it?
Not Eeyub. His name was something else. I forgot his name.
But
he said Lashon about the grandson of Shaul to King David. Sivia or Sivia? I think it was Sivia. Sivia. Yeah, that was. I don't remember the name. Yeah. Very good point. Anyways, this was one thing that I wanted to share with you. We got 5 more minutes to go. Please, guys, don't come so late.
Sorry.
If you do that, I want to buy food here. You have to eat the garbage, I don't keep it till 9 o'clock. I'm just kidding. I'm not that type. I'm just kidding. Anyway, just 2 points. Why we blow the shofar on Rosh Hashana, they're actually not the typical reasons that we know. Basically the reasons, simple ones why we blow the shofar is like a trumpet that wakes you up from your dream. You're sleeping, there's an alarm clock that wakes you up. The Rambam says some people are not really sleeping with closed eyes, but they're sleeping within the pleasures of the world. They're not up to serve God. So the shofar scares you, says, wake up, man. You're not here in the world to become part of the world. We're here to influence the world, to become godly. Another reason that we give up, we blow the shofar, it's actually the time that we recrown God to take care of us. So in the olden days, when they were crowning the king, they would actually take trumpets and blow. You ever saw the movies when the king, hear a king? So they blow the shofar. So the blowing of the shofar is for the crowning of God. I don't know if I'm going to have time to do both of them, but I'm going to do one reason why we blow the shofar. So there's a story of the Baal Shem Tov that he brings actually a parable. It's not a true story, and explains why we blow the shofar. There was a king. He had a son in the palace. Obviously, the son, every time he wakes up in the morning, the servants dress him. They do everything that he wants. So the kid really can't take care of himself, right? He needs all his servants. But the king wants him to be independent. So he has to design a plan for the son to go somewhere that there's no servants around. So he will have to, take care of himself on his own. But it's very dangerous too. Maybe he's going to fail. So what he does, he kicks his son out of the palace. He gives him some money, obviously. And he says, you know what? You got to go take care of yourself. Nobody in the palace is going to take care of you. So So the son goes out, not being used to being independent. So he blows up the money that his father gave him, right? Like many of us that we do. Just kidding, nobody. Jews are smart. We don't lose our money. We don't waste it. Right? We give it to charity. We use it for good things. And then after a while, he starts having bad friends, bad influence on him. And he's like so far from his father's palace that he even forgets the language that they spoke in the palace. Obviously, it's not a true story because the palace doesn't have a separate language. They speak the language of the country. After all, that he has a miserable life, he decides to go back to the palace. He's not living good. So somehow he gets back to the palace, but he doesn't speak the language. So he comes at the door, and with his sign language, he's trying to explain that he's the prince. Finally, they understand what he says, but they laugh at him. You being the prince? No way. They kick him out. So anyway, anytime he tries to explain, they don't accept it. So someone has to get his father's attention. He remembered that, let's say if the father's bedroom was, I don't know, on the western side, next to the western wall. So he goes on the back, and he sees that the window to the bedroom is open. So sits down and he starts crying. His crying meant, Father, come and save me. As you know, parents, they really recognize the voice of their kids, right? Caring parents. You could even be, whatever, not see you, not hear you for 5 months, but they recognize the voice. So the king hears it crying, and he says, oh my gosh, this is my son. He looks out of the window, and he sees that's his son. He comes and picks him up. He brings him to the palace. That's a parable that Baal Shem Tov brings. So it says the same thing happens to every Jewish soul. When we were in Gan Eden in paradise, right? Everything was there. Godliness is there. So for the soul, it's no big deal to serve God. No Yetzer Hara, no evil inclination, no physical needs. So if you have somebody in paradise, what do you want him to do? To come and eat potatoes? There's no food there. All you have is only godliness. No kebab, no Tel Aviv, none of those stuff. So then God says, you know what? The neshama is enjoying God, but he's not earning it. He doesn't deserve it. He's just there, dependent. I have to make him independent. He has to go to a place that he could choose between good and bad. And if he's going to choose to do good, so then he makes himself perfect. He deserves to come back to Gan Eden and enjoy God. So God sent us to a very, very far place, which is this world. And we're supposed to fight against all the obstacles and keep Torah and mitzvah. This is our daily life. But then some of us fail. And we get so far from God that we don't even speak. We don't even know how to pray. Seriously. We don't even know how to pray. We don't speak God's language. So then when Rosh Hashana comes, so God reveals himself when we have this feeling that I want to go back, but I don't know how to communicate with God. This is exactly what the shofar is. The shofar has the crying voice. When somebody cries, he sighs for a while. You know how you blow the shofar, right? First you have the long voice, then you have the 3 broken voices. The 3 broken voices are like longer sighs, and then when a baby cries, right, there's a lot of short voices. That's a cry of a baby. That you're crying and we're saying, God, our Father, our Mother, please save us from, being gone astray. That's actually one of the secrets, one of the reasons of blowing shofar on Rosh Hashana. It's our cries to God. Some depth to it.